doesn't mind that. Other people feel free to come up. If you want to keep your distance, that's okay. But we've got some more seats up here. So we are here to talk about community character, design, those sorts of things. My name is Brian Wright. I am the principal of Town Planning and Urban Design Collaborative, and working to help lead the team of planners and architects, engineers, sustainable stormwater specialists, landscape designers, all sorts of people, to try to help figure out what could be on this property in the future. So please go ahead and do an introduction. Richard Reed, resident.
Reed, resident. Candy Chavez, resident.
Diane May.
Lisa Aldemay.
Bob Aldemay.
Noah Aldemay.
Duffy Aldemay.
Jennifer Aldemay.
Denise Fincher, I do not live in Alabama. I have friends who live there. And I'm the chair of the city's planning advisory board.
Victoria Robus, citizen, and I'm a member of the Planning Advisory Board.
Kelly Gibson, Planning and Conservation Director.
Amy Thompson with Bristol Development.
Taylor Brock, Charlotte Brock Architects.
Claire Morris, TPUDC.
Charles Carlisle with Bristol Development Group.
Ian Curtin and the Historical American Club. I've lived in Medina for over 20 years, so I'm very familiar with the growth that's taken place on the farm. I'm now a full-time resident.
Your signing.
I don't know why it's not working. Probably because I touched it.
Right, Stetson, I'm a county resident, also city property owner.
Awesome. This meeting is actually better attended than the conservation meeting. I'm surprised by that, but I thought they'd be kind of close, you know, but this was wonderful. So for how many first time participants of this charrette process are there here? Your first meeting? Okay, great. Thank you for being here. The process here, we have a sign-in sheet.
We have a sign-in sheet. This is being recorded for those that aren't able to be here, and we've been collecting emails throughout so that we have kind of a distribution list for any of the meetings you haven't been able to attend.
Yeah, so if you missed a meeting, you can please watch it. So the process is that these meetings have a topic, but the meetings can kind of go where they want to go, and then somebody always nicely goes, "Hey, remember we're here to talk about this thing or that thing," and so we kind of come back to it. But everything's so interrelated that it's hard to focus on one thing in particular. We had on a couple of nights ago. What day was that? What night was that? Opening Thursday night. That's terrible dates. Thursday night we had an opening presentation where we talked about the site, what we've learned, what we've done so far, which has consisted of learning, and people were surprised to hear and skeptical, and still may be, that we haven't done anything yet. We haven't been drawing, we haven't started playing. Well, at that point we have now, but at that point we literally came in with blank pieces of paper. And so we knew that we wanted to hear from the community first. That is our process, and it's probably different than what you've experienced with other developments that you may have encountered over the years, here and elsewhere. We just find that it works better for us to try to figure out what you might actually want, knowing that you don't want anything, like starting with that. We don't want development. And then, so assuming that the property will be developed and is zoned, and the property owner, I think they've had it for 40 years. So they're ready to have something else happen with it. And no one has come forward to buy it for conservation purposes. And so we are trying to figure out how to make the most of it. If we're going to have development, what's the best version of development that you all would be comfortable with? A lot of that comes down to character of the project, because so many developments here and around the country, if It's really just, the developers focus on, square feet, number of units, et cetera. And they have something that they do, and that's how they do it, and they just kind of crank it out. And you get, to the point where it's not recognizable where you are when you look at development. Every place looks like every other place. And so we want to work really hard to make sure that that is not a criticism that is levied against what happens on this site in the future. To do that, we study the local architecture of the region. We've been roaming around for Medina, obviously, amazing examples of historic architecture, incredible preservation that's going on there with architecture, and trying to be inspired by that. And then also recognizing that we aren't downtown, right? And so even if you did a replica of downtown, it might be cool, but it might not be site appropriate or contextual here. Because here we have, woodland, we have the forest. We do know that if it's not the original forest, we have our survey that shows on there that this was the such and such farm at some point, so it was farmed. And what's here is has now transformed though, and animals live there. There's habitat. There are plants of value on the site. There are hydrological systems that are in place. Some of them have been influenced over the years, but since they've been left alone, now they've kind of turned into something better. Now what was a ditch, they're connected some wetlands, probably to help the farmer move the water out of his way, is now has some cool ecological functionality to it. And so even though it's changed over time, over the years, there are some cool things that have happened. So what I really am trying to understand in this meeting, and is really to learn from all of you, what does community character mean to you? It's such a hard thing. All of you develop a house, maybe something a little different in mind. One of the ways that we extract that information from the community, because we work all over the country, for developers, but also for cities. So a lot of times we'll be representing the citizens. And so in both cases, though, just the way we work, it's important for the citizens' ideas and everything to be reflected in the plans and architecture. And so explaining, it's like, where are your favorite areas of the city, of the county? What are the places we should look at for inspiration? So one thing I have learned so far is, I said, is there any development that people like around? No, not really, except for they like their neighborhoods, right? Everybody likes their neighborhood. But from a commercial perspective, the one thing that I've heard people say they like is the Palmetto Walk, little shopping center. And so I was so thankful to have an example to look at, and I can see why you like it. It's really charming and feels like it fits in from my perspective. And then we've also heard that people like Amelia Park from a residential perspective. That felt like that was a nice job if you're having residential. So for those who are in attendance for the first time, just to clarify too, while we started with a blank slate, the idea was to have to change the commercial zoning on the property to do something that was more of a mix, to have some neighborhood serving commercial components to it, but also having a residential component to it as well. And so we heard over the past few years that Publix was looking at the site to do a grocery store and shopping center, some out parcels and stuff. And we've heard that people felt like that character wasn't in keeping with what they had in mind. And so that's okay. And that was unfortunately another group who came in to look at that. And so, but we were able to learn from your experience with that. And so what we're trying to do is something that is hypersensitive to the site, to the island, for the island overall. And so as you're thinking about and sharing with me inspiration, think about it from like, what is sort of the ultimate in sustainability and being sensitive on the land and architectural integrity and character and those sorts of things. So I'm going to pause and open it up. Character, who wants to go first? What does that mean to you? What are your favorite places? Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, I'm too eager. I'm like,
Have you ever been to Open?
I have, yes.
You understand how they
camouflage everything.
Yes, the camouflage, and I remember early on, it was so well loved because they had that little strict sign ordinance too.
Yeah.
You know.
So you wouldn't know there's a Walmart there.
Right,
You wouldn't know.
you never can see the fun shops.
Yeah, you know, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
The fact that when development comes in, and you're high density buildings, how do you camouflage without like roof?
Right.
And we're the last of the barrier items of the ecosystem here too. We've got to address. But from the aesthetic part of the building, we don't need high rises. We don't need max construction of the characters. Now, the character's been ruined for years by the Sheffields, and I'm not gonna get political. or anything. The character is what we want to do. Guys, what can we do? And within Hilton, yeah, it really is good.
One thing, but hey, Brian, can you give me the other pencil? Our pencils crossing, mine that works with the other. I don't know. It notes and I have to scratch it in the screen.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, sir. All right. Anyway, so. Thank you, that's great, that's super helpful, because then I have a visual for what that looks like. And, you know, where else? Yes.
So, thinking about Amelia Island as a barrier island, when you take out trees, when you install hardscape, you're interfering with our infrastructure. Trees take the wall out of the winds when a storm comes. Hardscape interferes with drainage. We've had enough of that. We don't need more. So thinking about the Hilton Head analogy, they have done their level best to stay low to the ground and respect that tree roots are a natural drainage assist as well as many other things. So I think that you have to look at the mechanics of what you are doing in the context of a barrier island. And that's how you remain resilient. If you take out those features in great number, we become less resilient. And as residents, we're all at risk. It doesn't just affect our homes when the storm comes, but it affects our insurance rates. It affects our FEMA ratings, which in turn also affects our insurance rates. We change not just the character of the island, but we change how we live our lives and how we pay for what's about this.
Yeah, I was actually, the Tree Conservancy has this great video, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it, it's, but describing, it was wonderful, so much research you can do, just talking about barrier islands in general, but that was like specifically this, Amelia Island, and just, seeing that different vegetation has different value, benefit, if you will, and so that the pines are kind of like not super helpful for the storm event that you're concerned about. One of the things that inspired me to think about is, as we are looking at impacting the site as you're describing, when we are looking at planting new trees and those sorts of things, like looking at what the original vegetation, what the ecosystems were originally before it was farmed, and it's sort of put back with these pines, or even the pines that everyone thinks are the best pines. And so trying to improve some of those things while we're having an impact, and understanding the systems and the uniqueness of this barrier island, but Amelia Island as well.
One of the crippling concepts I think that comes along with any development on the island is the first thing that gets ripped out very often, even before somebody buys or rezones, is the understory.
Yeah.
And I think that the understory is the underdog story of how we retain soils, mitigate, floodwater and excessive rains. So looking at the understory, not just the trees, would be a key piece.
No, that's a great point, and our surveyors will attest they're like, we could just bush hog this. And that would be, make it a lot easier to find where the good trees are. And thankfully, in conversations with community members, they're like, yeah, it's not just the trees we care about. It's the understory and the animals that are in the understory. And then in sort of my further research, one thing you all haven't pointed out yet is the mid-story even, so it's like all these, kind of different, the ecosystem is vertical, not just horizontal. And I think I took that for granted before I started learning. So thank you all for sending me the videos and the information to learn more about. That's super helpful.
So there's a population you're looking at.
We don't know yet. We will, Monday night, we'll talk about the number of units that we've figured out. I mean, at this point, I would just be guessing, but one thing I know for sure is that the number is more than 0, which we know is often not okay here. So, but we'll get there. So I'm not trying to skirt around it yet. I just
Really, really in that whole project up here, here in the front,
in Yulee.
yeah. What's the name of it?
Oh, yeah.
In tributary.
So they want to go to the beach, they got to cross something called bridge.
Yeah.
Okay, and I grew up in Connecticut. When we go to the beach, Cape Cod, and I go across the bridge, we go up 2 hours.
Wow.
The same thing's gonna happen. So how do you get in the FEMA evacuation?
Yeah.
How do you get up the bridge?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, one of the things we talked about in the last meeting was you guys have created some problems for yourself over the years by not connecting your streets and having all these sort of cul-de-sacs in the neighborhoods. And I said, well, one of the things that we do in our planning is to really make sure we focus on connectivity. And then somebody rightly pointed out, yeah, that's great. And that means we'll be able to get to the bridge faster. But once we get to the bridge, then what, so I think that's a fair point. So we're learning more about that and trying to understand, but we've heard that concern for sure. Yes, please.
If we're talking about a sense of place, because I think that was part of one of the subjects for today's meeting, a sense of place.
Yeah.
As you turn right at the traffic light coming off the bridge and you're going down Amelia Island Parkway, it is really that major southbound roadway that starts to link a lot of the new development, the Lakewoods, the different subdivisions that have occurred, and it all leads down towards Amelia City, the plantation, the Ritz. And maybe when you think of a sense of place for this property, you start to think that it may sort of set your mind, if you're a visitor and your first time here, maybe the development could start to frame the expectation of whether it's a Southern type theme or the low country type theme, that's something that starts to set the expectations for that whole corridor that really leads all the way to the south end of the island.
Yeah, because this is like a gateway.
It really is a gateway, and I think there's some opportunities, whether it's neighborhood commercial styles of rent, residential, that whole mixed use. But I think there's ways to whether, and I'm not an expert in any of this, but it just seems to me that really is an opportunity to sort of frame that sense of place as you start to go into the island. So just a thought there. I don't know what that would look like, but it just seems like something reasonable.
Thank you.
Has the property already been resumed for mixed
No.
use?
It's still commercial. Two of the parcels are in the county and one is in the city. And so what we understand is the process would be that the 2 county parcels will be annexed into the city. And during that process, we would go through rezoning as well. Did I get that right? Okay. That's right. Learn.
Is that guaranteed that you're going to be able to rezone?
No, of course not. No, the city can decide that you just want to leave it commercial, and then as an outsider, my perspective is, and I see this all the time, developers are, I've said this in the last meeting too. Developers are, tend to like to say, well, if you don't let us do what we want, we'll do something really bad that you're gonna hate. From our perspective, I think at the end of the day, if we are not successful in rezoning, then it's just not a project that Bristol is going to do. And then someone else comes in and they may say, we like this commercial zoning. Oh, and by the way, that Publix, I think the Publix would be allowed by right. Yes, so the Publix would have been allowed by right. There wouldn't have to be a whole process of, what do you think about, what would you like to see and all? And so it's not that I worry what we would do something you don't like, I wonder who comes next. So it's not guaranteed for sure.
But basically, you're drawing up your plans as though it's getting approved. You're not going to do an alternate commercials, what it would look like. You're just doing it based on
Exactly.
it getting approved.
That's right, yeah, so, just rolling the dice, this is the process, we're coming up with strategy, we're gonna ask for the rezoning process to move forward and see what happens.
Question. Or another question. I have been impressed with the Omni plantation because from 2 points of view. When I go down First Coast Highway, you don't realize that you're in the middle of the development. It's trees, it's foliage, almost looks like the canopy that we have in Ritz-Carlton.
And as opposed to manicured homeowner association looking stuff, it's very natural looking.
And interesting, have you been to the Omni plantation?
I have not yet.
All right, there's 3 roundabouts. If you hit roundabout number 1, the closest one to where we are now, you're going to go into a maintenance. Well, that's maintenance in the veranda, restaurant, and it's beautiful back there. It's woodsy and it feels good. Now, there's ways that you can get all the way to the Omni without going back to the highway. But if you were to go back to the highway, look roundabout number 7 or number 2. We have Bob's Steakhouse in the wood setting, beautiful. And then you have Marche Beret, and then a whole group of stores in a pond. All gorgeous.
There's a bandstand there, there's all kinds of stuff. But another part is that the architecture hangs together in a pageant over time, not like it was overly planned. The feeling, it doesn't feel artificial. Involved kind of a sense. And the hotel is a big hotel. And that's kind of what it is. But
And it didn't,
That's it. It didn't.
it didn't peak with it.
No.
It didn't peak with it.
Anyway, and there's a third roundabout. And the third roundabout takes you to houses. They're in woods that look beautiful. It takes you to the hotel, takes you to the old Marsh Golf Course where I like to go. It's just, and you feel part of nature. It doesn't feel cosmopolitan. It just feels good.
So the developers of the Omni, the plantation were originally the developers that helped him.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
Well, no
so
wonder.
you
So
get
we
that
went
kind
through
of,
those
they were
three.
here and then they went to, yeah.
correct.
So they were. So the Omni, the general area of plantation started by Jack Hill,
And his goal was to protect their.
Right.
So I
Perfect.
know that. And
Yeah.
so we were talking about characters. And what makes the island special is the fact that unmanicured nature is a huge part of it. And it's very relaxed. For me, coming out of Los Angeles,
Oh, yeah.
the land of country, it's a very relaxed feel. That's the old Florida.
What were you gonna say?
Well, no,
what they, I just want to echo what they just said, it's kind of an old Florida feel. But my question actually went back to a couple of things that some people said spurred my mind about the number of units that you can be putting on there. This is probably a question for the city. Is, you know, there's a small island. We have an older infrastructure here in terms of water supply, sewer, electric. How much burden is that going to put on the new system, and will that developer be responsible for upgrades to the system to support that development?
Yes, so I will let them answer more specifically, but in the meeting yesterday morning, we talked about utilities infrastructure.
I missed that.
Oh, it's okay. Watch it, but we'll give you this next, seriously, you don't take the time, but the question was asked, and the answer was, there's excess capacity. You guys have a robust system. So
Almost more than double what is currently needed to serve what our current utility area is. So we have redundancy already built into the system to support current development and future development.
and since this is one of only a couple of the larger parcels that's left on the island, yeah, sounds, because the next question is, well, yeah, well, maybe it's enough for you, but what about the next and the next? And I think that anything else in the future would be, you know, smaller scale intervention, or I guess technically people get to tear downs and stuff here.
Infill
But
and redevelopment.
yeah, so
Okay, so a follow-up to that question is, we may have excess capacity to handle it, but what about the age of the infrastructure
It's
itself?
relatively new.
Okay.
Yeah, within the last 20 years is when the capacity was built out.
that's
Just
awesome.
down in Fort Lauderdale, where we moved from a while back, it seemed like every other week there was a water main break because of the aging infrastructure.
Sewer.
Not that we couldn't, they couldn't handle the capacity, but it was sewer and water.
And the
And
lines that are
sewage
servicing
lines.
within this area are within the last 20 years.
Right. Yeah, some of the places we work, like we were working in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, you know, it's like founded in
It's
16
Like
something.
clay
I don't
pipes,
know.
yeah,
It's
there's a
like
lot of
pipe.
them like
It's
that.
crazy.
So yours is all PVC then. They never do.
I believe so.
20, yeah.
So now, when you say double the capacity, what would you assume for properties like this that are vacant? Because you'd have to assume something and get that.
They
that
will do a
number.
calculation based on what for commercial and residential, based on what's called an equivalent residential
Yeah.
rate. And then they will be able to determine the impact. So that it's not that they wouldn't be paying their impact into the system, the development will. So that future service upgrades could be handled by the new development. But the system itself functionally has what is necessary to support the development. And then we have built in place impact fees to make sure that the system continues to be upgraded.
Which, by the way,
So
just to
we-
clarify, what she said was, she said double capacity. My understanding when he explained it yesterday was based on your current daily use today, it's like
1.2 or something.
1.2 million gallons per day or something. And there's like 3 point something millions.
3.5
So you do an equivalent residency per acre, or how do you?
per unit. So, and it's maybe based on
So
square
what would
footage
that
for
be in a
commercial
25
and then residential, whatever the residential rate would be.
Yeah, so we have to
But
calculate.
you'd have to assume something then for parcel, like this.
There will, yes, they'll have to make some assumptions
No
based
matter what the
on,
development is, you would assume
Exactly.
something.
well,
But you don't know what
no,
that, you don't know what that.
we don't
is.
know what it is until they make a proposal.
Oh, no, I mean what you just said, Del. You're giving a,
No,
you're giving
the
some kind of calculation.
current system at the present time has more than double the capacity necessary to support
The
what we
island.
have and
Entire
within our service
Just
area.
existing then. You're not even
Exactly.
talking about any vacant land.
Right, so any, in the vacant land, then we will look at the impact to the system with their proposal. And
And
then make
frankly, the
sure that
reason
there's
we do, the reason that they're talking about annexation is to have access to that sewer and water.
Right.
Oh,
That's the only
yeah.
reason that you would annex into the city.
But that's the city only, not the entire island.
No, it's within the city's utility service area, which would include both city and non-city portions. So Ocean Breeze as an example, Windermere as another example, new development that has connected into the city's system, but is not part of the city's jurisdictional boundary right now.
Yes, sir.
The same thing, it's like you're making comparisons against what we have now versus what we don't know is being proposed.
Yes.
So that's a big point right there.
It
And,
would have to be analyzed.
right,
once we know
right,
the
and
proposal.
what is the comparison between this amount of acres and what the plantation is right
I don't know. This is
Well,
45 acres, something like that.
now? Yeah, and the plantation is huge.
Yeah.
Come on now, you have to come down with some real numbers.
We will. Yeah, that's
Okay.
what, I mean, we're literally, we'll say, you know, certainly by the time we approach for any rezoning or any of that, we'll have to literally say, we are looking for this many units, this many square feet of commercial, et cetera. And then the city says, okay, great, here's the formula, and you have to plug in.
And we will have all of these kind of meetings before you go to the city, or do we all have to?
So
crowd
let
into
me,
the-
let me talk a little bit about the process so that people understand. So this is a multi-step process. It's going to take months, maybe over a year. So the first thing will be, they'll come to us with an annexation request. It'll go to the planning department, who will do an analysis on it and a set of recommendations. It'll come to the planning advisory board, and we will then either vote up or down to annex them into the city. We can annex them in at different zoning options. I mean, we could technically annex it all in as commercial right now, leave it like it is, and then through a planned unit development, think about how you would redo the zoning. So there are lots of options. In that process, there's plenty of public notice and plenty of public opportunity for input. And then
Public notice as far as the page on the newsletter.
there'll be public notice in the newspaper. Everything that the planning advisory board does is public notice. So there'll be public notices in the newspaper, be on Facebook and on the city site, so that you can also sign up on the city's website to get notices of what's going on to the planning advisory board if you want to see everything. So you can do that. So we will either vote it up or down, and then our vote will then go to the city commission. And then the city commission will either accept our recommendation and vote it up or down, or they'll not accept our recommendation and vote however they want to vote. So let's assume for a minute that it gets annexed. So then the next step would, in all likelihood, be a request for what's called a planned unit development, which is kind of so Amelia Park is a planned unit development, as an example. So they came in, they said, okay, we want to do a residential thing here. And in a PUD, you can negotiate all of the components. So you can negotiate, there's lots of things you can negotiate, like lot lines and heights and setbacks and roads and all of that. So assuming that we annex in, and then the next phase is they would present a proposal for a planned unit development. Again, it goes to the planning department.
In terms of process, though, the preference would be to consolidate that all into one, so that the annexation, assignment of land use, zoning with the PUD overlay would come in together as a package, so that it is
And
very clear. the
permitting.
intent. The permitting comes subsequent to that.
Okay,
The building
and who
permits are
will
pulled
do
later.
the permit?
The city.
Uh-huh.
They'll come to the city for permits, for building
Oh,
permits.
So that's changed. Okay.
What do you mean that's changed?
Isle de May was never permitted by the city or the county.
No, everything came in through the city. It was annexed into the city and.
It was annexed, yes, it was annexed. Would you show me the permits?
There, all the individual home sites were provided permits.
Not individual home sites. I'm talking about the road structure.
Like the whole neighborhood.
Yeah,
the development.
exactly.
We do have a process in place now to capture site.
Now we.
I apologize, I was not here back, as far back as when Isle de May was being developed, but
Okay.
we do
So
have
it has
a
been
site
corrected.
infrastructure permit process that is in place to capture common area improvements, stormwater, roadways.
Okay, so not just stormwater. but also roadways.
So all of that process is full of public opportunity for comment. And depending on the size of what's going on, we have the option to do workshops where we would just, talk about it and take public comment, as well as formal processes within a planning advisory board meeting where then we would have votes. So there'll be ample opportunity for all kinds of public comment, not just within the planning advisory board process, but then once it gets in front of the city commission, there'll be another whole round of public comment. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for everyone to weigh in on what you like or what you don't like about what the proposal is going to be.
Yeah, and also all the stuff that we're doing this week, this whole charrette process is really just in addition to all that. This is the informal portion rather than just showing up at planning commission or wherever and saying, hey, what do you guys think? And so I was just doing a little math here. So over the days that we're here, we are, have had the opening presentation, the hands-on workshop where the community members who participated marked up those maps and said what they'd like to see back there. And then we've had 4 different topical meetings like this one. Then we'll have the closing presentation. We'll present the work that we've created this week and all the things we've heard from the community. And throughout that time, for probably 50 or 60 hours, this studio is open and available for people to come in at any time and share with us their thoughts and ideas and all that. And so in addition to all the things that you just said, then there's all the things we're doing now. So hopefully by the end of the day, when we do show up with an application, you're going to be like, oh yeah, that's what we talked about. Oh look, that's the thing that I told them we should do, and oh look, there's my house. Oh my gosh, they fixed that drainage problem. That was something that we have, I'm already suffering from. So that's hopefully the process. Yes.
I wanted to get back a little bit to sense of place. So when I started to calm down. So a couple of things that I'd like to point out is the city has done a great job at certain points in the island of making you feel welcome. So you can go to the arena, the visitor center, the airport, all of that, all of those are symbols of welcome to Amelia Island, our barrier island. So I applaud what you're saying because I think that's what, even when we're talking about the stormwater and the other infrastructure, we're talking about protecting a barrier island that has a role, which you've heard talking about that, but also just our sense of character. And part of our character to me is also our little quirkiness, I like to call it. So we have special events where the people come in and they invade us like pirates that we are, from the other end. So the whole parking and greeting people is important to us at our special events. That's important. Also important to us is our sense of history. And so much of what I have been here for a few days. Much of what I haven't heard is how does this new connect with our history and our diversity, which is a strong part of our character. Is how do we celebrate the shrimping? How do we celebrate and let the group that's coming in to know even about our slave history? There's all kinds of really special things about Amelia Island. So when I'll take ownership, and I know I said the other day, I don't see this plot as a destination because I don't. I see it as it must blend in to our sense of character. How do you fit the history in at the same time as protecting the infrastructure?
Those are all great points. Thank you. I've got them noted here. And, what we like to do is really, I love history. And so I go back in, I study it. I look at the old maps and the old photographs and learn about every place we work. I usually grab some, oyster shell off the, out of the marsh and put it on my desk at my office. And then I don't know if they're allowed to do that here. I haven't done it yet. Thank you.
You have to go find stars.
Mike, I think my kids are today, so I'm jealous of going.
Have you been to the museum?
And not yet. That's
You need to
on
go
my
to the
list.
museum.
Yeah, and the fourth, I heard.
One thing I want to say, funny enough with my neighbor here, is the fact that we have a good water reserve is due to the fact that we're very close to the top Florida aquifer, that's great. And with that great, city sewer system and infrastructure that way, we lack transportation. You can't move at the roundabout right now at Saba Road and Seaside Park. The parking is closed over there now on the beach as well. There are other types of infrastructure that go with any other major development. And we may have adequate water, sewer, and electricity, but we lack other things. And particularly when you talk about Amelia Island Parkway as some sort of corridor vision, taking you all the way down the island. When you bring in new residents, how do they get to the beach? Where do they park? Because inevitably they'll want to take their car and their bags and the things. There are big issues with that here, I think, in my opinion.
No, fair enough. One of the things that we hope to do, as always, like I said, seek out ways to help solve some problems. Right now, if you live in any of the neighborhoods around this property, besides, I guess technically going to the beach, you get in your car for everything, right? And so I hope, my goal is that we're going to, in the commercial component of this, be neighborhood serving. So there's things where instead of going to, I think you already have a Publix, right? So instead of going to Publix or something, for an ingredient or two that you need for dinner that night, you're just gonna walk over to a market here. Instead of going to, you have Starbucks here?
Oh, yeah.
Instead of going to Starbucks, you go, to the coffee shop, here. And so we're actually getting some of you out of your cars for some of your trips in the day, as well as those who live here. I want to make a dent. I'm not, blind to that fact, but something that helps. Yes.
When you were talking about utilities, I only heard mention of water and sewer. I heard no mention of electric. What is our capacity there?
The city refers to Florida Public Utilities for its electric. They also supply natural gas service, and I believe it runs along the corridor at the present time. And their former headquarters actually adjacent to this parcel, which is, I believe, also for sale right now.
Across the street.
It's right next to the same larger tract of land. And then there is a wellhead right now, getting back to water right next to the site too. We discussed yesterday and being able to test the pressures to make sure that there would be sufficient water.
Okay, but my question is specific to electricity and capacity, and that's going to be a big issue moving forward with the electrification of future vehicles, which are going to be a big topic by 2025, even for our existing population, without taking into account future growth. So I highly doubt we have that capacity.
One of the things that the region has looked at is being able to provide for some the fast-paced charging systems, where I know that in this area we don't have at the present time. But I believe that we have sufficient capacity for electricity. I would defer to their representatives to speak to that.
And we
I don't
also,
think-
just like with everything, we'll have to get, go through and make sure there is capacity. We'll get certification from each of the different utilities and all that. It's not like we get to just say, hey, we want to put development here, and I hope you have enough power for us. Like, there's a whole part of the process that you were describing. We'll incorporate all of that stuff now. Whether or not they've been thinking ahead like you are about electric vehicles and increased capacity that they need for that, that I don't know, but I know we'll have to go through a process and prove that there's capacity. Make adjustments.
Because by 2025, the majority of new vehicles being produced are going to be electric. And current vehicles on the road are going to be phasing out.
Just so you know, too, we have a little solar farm right behind the property here, so I don't know.
It's the cities.
Yeah, so it's some of those cars.
I'm sure that doesn't produce enough power for that. But looking at the location, I see it's right on top of the airport.
Next to it, yeah.
Next to it, yeah. And I can only imagine looking into the future, if residences were to be built there, it would only be a matter of time until residents in a development directly adjacent to the airport are complaining about the noise. And what does that do for the future of our airport?
Yeah, so we talked about that in the last meeting. I gave a great little story. I'll share with you quickly. I was concerned when I noticed there's an airport. I thought, oh boy, that's going to be a lot of noise. And so I immediately said, oh, I'm sorry. I said the other night, like, I herniated disc in my neck. And so until I got here, just the day before, I was like in a cervical collar and everything. So I'm still like, sorry. Normally I spin my head around more, but I'll speak back and project. So I was worried about the airport. So I told Charles, I said, oh, we're going to make sure we need to market this to aviation enthusiasts so we don't have people who are writing about it. We met with the person who runs the airport, and he was telling me about the calls he gets all the time. And I thought, when people moved in, I think the airport was probably there. I think that's the point you're making, and so they noticed it. But I met a guy who said, I live just by the airport. And I was like, oh, I bet you're one of the ones who calls the airport. And his wife said, oh, no. Every time an airplane goes by, we all have to come at the window and look and write down what it is because he's an aviation enthusiast. And so I understand what you're saying. In some ways, the bigger concern for me on noise is actually the barking dogs. They actually are much more noticeable, but I think it just comes during feeding time. So we dog enthusiasts also. Yes, sir.
Yeah, so, on the way up here, I was, everybody's bringing up great points, which I'd love to see, and I didn't go to any other sessions, that I think it's on the first one. But, after thinking about it for a couple of days, I think, the look and feel is what people come to Fernandina, the beauty of it, everybody says, why, oh, Fernandina is beautiful, so, keeping up with the other topics, keeping the look and feel of it's real nice, but then I start thinking, well, what is this plan really about? It's about providing housing, lower cost housing that's available now, because there isn't any housing. But, in comparison about doing Hilton Head, well, you're talking about exclusive communities, the South End, high-end stuff. I don't think you're talking about building high-end condos or rental places here. It's more for affordable housing. It sounds like I could be wrong.
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out.
Right. Well, here's my point is, if you build 300 units, we don't know, 400 units. It could be 2, 3 cars, 4 cars per household. You could have a whole bunch. First of all, where are all these people going to park? Is there going to be a parking garage? I guess you could park by the airport. What about the other, how do you get across to the other units on the north end of there? How do you get across the park? Very, very busy. And then also, just driving up here, I started looking at all the access points. Starting at 30, down by 32. They're all filled up now. Part of it's wildlife, a lot of units, all those people who are moving up here, they're not doing it for the location, they're doing it close to the beach. Granted, it's 12 miles away. But I came from Conowingo, where 96 I bought, and they had a little drawbridge there. And they only had Michler, whatever you call it, one beach access into Guam. And now it's to the point where nobody can go to the beach unless you get there at like 7 in the morning. So even without your development going in, I still think we have a big, huge issue with parking. So that's just my take on it. If you want to keep the beauty, but you're going to have to put a lot of money into making it look pretty. A theme would be great. Anytime you go to a new place, you want to be welcomed and that'll look nice. And I don't know. I think that's going to be tough to do.
You have a drawbridge still?
No, they put a 60 foot.
I was thinking it might be nice. I could have like residence hours at the beach and you just leave the bridge up and then you get it down.
One of the things that contributes to the traffic and congestion sometimes are what you live on and they work on.
Yeah.
And what you're building will alleviate some of that. Or is it going to just add more traffic?
Yeah, so we're trying to figure out, because we've heard that that's an issue. We've heard it's not just an issue, but it's something that you all are
Are
concerned
these
about.
rentals?
What?
Are these rentals?
So we're not sure yet. I think we're Charles.
Charles said they were rentals.
Yeah, so he
Said more
basically,
likely than not.
more likely, exactly.
Rentals.
And that would
Exactly.
be long-term, not short-term.
Long-term rental, not
Well,
short-term.
and but at what kind of rate?
Not
So no
Airbnbs.
like
Hold on, hold on,
Airbnbs,
hold
no vacationers.
We got the one question.
Will any of these long-term rentals turn into Airbnb?
That's not our intention. I don't know what the, if you guys have
I mean, would
ordinances
you put
against.
something in the lease that says you can't do that? Because then it turns into a whole different ballgame.
Well, that really comes down to the HOA, because I just did that. I just bought a condo in a colony, and they say you cannot buy more than, you have to live there 7 months a year. If you want to rent it out, 7 months.
Do you have a short-term rental ordinance?
We do. Yes, and so if the community wanted to be more restrictive to avoid having short-term rental as a component within it, you would have to write that into your own deed restriction.
I guess my point is.
Right, or you could write it into the PUD itself
Okay.
that would restrict that type of scenario.
Got it.
If you're not going to alleviate the traffic issue, that I'm going south end of the island, and by 2:30, the traffic starts to build because shift changes go this way, that way. So some A1A domain, outdoor started. The traffic's coming towards me, it looked like 95. I couldn't believe it. And you get stuck in it and you can't go. These are all the people coming up this way. And you're gonna add to that unless.
Well, what I was gonna say was we've heard that this is an issue and concern, and so we're looking into, are there opportunities where we can incorporate workforce housing into the project? Now, the tricky thing is there are two sort of forces working against any development being able to include workforce housing. One is the conservation side of things, right? So we want to conserve more land, which means then from the development perspective, then rents go up to offset that. The second is the fees and the things that you have to pay the city. And so we're trying to look, are there opportunities? I assume that this isn't the first time that the city or the county has heard that this is a concern. And so if there are opportunities for relief, not from conservation, by the way, but for some of the other things, so we can be able to, sort of mitigate that and provide some of it. So.
The other thing you're concerned about traffic is hurricane refuge. There are two ways on this. You can have protection or you can lower the bridge. Protection floods on a good storm. It floods. You can't get through it. Coming this way, you may as well stay home. Because you'll sit in your car for 3 hours before you get to the bridge. So I think you're just not. Unless you can find a way to figure it out.
So from the construction traffic that you're gonna pose, and the number of people that you're gonna bring, try to get by a quick serve and quick trip over there and run to the left.
Yeah, how are you gonna build a community this size with a massive amount of traffic? I mean, you got those logging trucks that are bad coming in, but if you gotta build 40 acres of property for years, it's gonna be
it's
big
hard.
trucks coming in unless you ship it in.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get a park. I'm telling you, it's just not gonna work.
So for the purposes of this meeting, I'm happy, as always, to talk about all the different things. Many of these things, you'll be thankful to know, we've talked about in other meetings, and I know just from as a person who attends meetings, I want to say what I think about that topic, so I get it, and it's okay, because the more times we hear things, the more we see like what is consensus and what's just one person who was concerned about one thing. So I don't mean to cut you off, but I do know that some people are really want, to talk specifically about the character. So if we got those kind of things, if we talk about those first and then
So
we can.
unfortunately, there are a good number of people in the room that have been sitting through the meetings and have been talking about these things for the
Right.
last couple of days, and they're here to talk about design and character. And we definitely want, this is our opportunity, one of them, to hear, especially early on in the process, what you think about design and character. So.
My question is, and I'm not speaking for the group, but I hear a lot of concerns, which I know you're hearing too. And I'm just wondering, and really, I'm just wondering, at what point, if the residents, people being affected by this, are opposed to this development, what point does the force field shift if it goes one way or the other? And is it already in that place where we were talking yesterday about apparently Governor DeSantis installed a law about development?
Well, y'all just need to understand that the state of Florida is very pro-development. There was a new law this year, and the Burt Harris law, which has been in effect for a while, makes it difficult for a city or a county government to do any action that is perceived to be taking. So, that is an issue in all of Florida as
I'm
we
just
figure out
wondering-
what we need to, how we address these issues.
I think just from my own perspective, sounds to me like the force field is already, the assumption is, no, it's going to be built. You all just need to participate and try to help us design what you would like to see. That's where I'm coming out at this right now. It's not so much you want it. No,
Right.
that would pass.
No,
that.
you don't. Like, that's how I started the opening presentation. Like, I know that given the option, you all would take it just as it is in conservation. And so we've had that as a given. And we said, assuming that it's not been purchased for conservation and all that, then we have to assume it's going to be developed by either this team or somebody else. And so ideas, earnestly coming to you and saying, let's do it together, so.
Back to the character and sense of place and the type of housing, I think that I would bring some of it back to part of our economy is tied into the tourism. A lot of the people that are working here they're integral to our lives, and also the people that grew up here, the people, I always talk about the staff. Our staff that run our city that work really hard have to live off the island. So they often don't have a voice even in terms of voting. So I think just bringing it back a little bit to that sense of place. And I appreciate that you're trying to look at it from all different angles. But I think for me that's really important, because even when I did some work for a couple of years with the school counselors, they talk about with the kids, they teach the kids to say yes, ma'am, and for maybe a different reason than the way I was taught. They know that this is a service area, and they're here to take care of us. So I'll take it off. That's that sense of character with the pirates and the shrimp thing.
Yeah, that's great.
I just would be really careful if you do get into conversations about housing and housing affordability, which I hope that you do, because God knows we need it. I would like you to be really clear about the definitions for affordable versus workforce, which in my opinion has a slightly different twist to it, versus market rate. We've been through this conversation once before with another apartment complex. It didn't go well. Didn't turn out the way it was supposed to, as far as the end users were concerned.
Can you explain what that means?
Sure. Affordable housing has very clear definitions according to HUD.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I mean, when you said it didn't work out, what happened?
A previous apartment complex that was under consideration for construction kept talking about how the rent rates at the apartments would be workforce and affordable. They were not. When it came to actually opening their doors and start taking leases, they were market rate rents.
Period.
Well, in the
We'll be
workforce,
clear about whatever that is.
yeah, so one of the things that often people say by workforce housing, they mean teachers, nurses, firefighters, those
Right.
kinds of things. And so if I understand correctly, that apartment complex, maybe if you were the principal or something, you could possibly live, but not the teacher.
The teachers can't,
Right.
teachers have accepted contracts here in Nassau County and can't find a place to live here on the island, so they actually wind up vacating the contract, they were gonna leave the contract.
Wow.
We have a problem for EMT, fire, police, anybody who's perhaps in the first maybe 5 years of their career, maybe even longer. And then we have the vast majority of people. My kid's a chef at one of the plantation restaurants, one of the outlets. I'm telling you that she's putting in 12-hour days and would have to commute elsewhere to find a place to live. There's a tremendous number of hospitality service worker, and that's what's clogging up our roads too. I mean, if they have to come in from Yulee or Jacksonville or wherever,
Yeah.
that, and the bridge is never going to get wider.
So
FDOT told me that.
so that apartment development may have been more reasonably priced, contextually in the region, but not enough to meet the need for.
Just not to start a new topic, but could you put out some, a map that shows what your surveyors have determined as being wetland areas?
That's right. So there's little triangles that. It's a little hard to see.
All right,
the
so
line
I think-
weight.
So I guess this conversation is about the character, right? That's so, to me,
Supposed to be.
I get it. Well, there's a lot of concerns, but to me, what's really great about this place is the river to sea trail that they just put in a couple of years ago. And before, I lived right at one of the access points. So for me, I was very excited when I bought my house that I was able to just, it wasn't there, but when it came, and I think it's been a tremendous success. And I know down south, if you head down south A1A or Texture, you'll notice all the construction that's going on, and they're building bike paths. So I love biking. I think a lot of people on the island here like biking. The problem is it's kind of limited, and I was excited to hear that on the Parkway, they're gonna build a pathway. Whether that's still going on, I don't know. But it would be great when the development goes through, and it just like Nocketty, they have bike paths, double wide, hopefully no golf carts, but they would be able to, meander through the woods or.
Can we, maybe we can go over this map at the end, when we're all finished, so.
Just have a meandering pathway, through trees, just like, on the south end of the island, you go to the Amelia, to the Omni, there are all the bike paths there. It goes for miles. Eventually, you'll be able to try to post up 20 miles down and 20 miles back when it's all completed. But on the Parkway, there's nothing. I mean, you take your life in your hand as you try to ride a bike. And so to have a path, and I know it's been discussed, and I don't know what the plans are, but to have something going through those areas would be fantastic.
So bike trails up the Parkway to 200 from where they are now down south are on the TPO list for 23, 24, and 25.
What's TPO?
The transportation list for what's been approved for the Northeast Florida, for the North Florida region.
Yeah.
So there will be bike paths all the way up the Parkway to 200 over the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah, and one of the big problems is when you get down by the Ritz and the Omni, there are a lot of roads that kind of have to stop every 10 feet until you get down by the Omni.
And these bike paths are all being done by the state.
Okay.
So they're all being state managed because they're all in, but they're on the list and they'll be there.
Yeah, I mean, it'd just be nice to take the risk, not stopping every 10 feet because of all the development. Just my thoughts on it.
Thank you. All right, so we've got Hilton Head, we've got the Plantation, we've got Amelia Park, we've got Palmetto Walk. What are some other places that we can learn? They don't have to just be around here. I mean, if many of you travel and go see places. How many other?
Not to use a big one in there, they built, been building for 10 years down in Palm Beach. I don't really like it. I moved from there.
I want to know places you do like.
Well, there are parts that are done nice, like the bike paths and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
like the golf carts. But, you know, that's just a big, huge development of 30,000, 40,000 homes that are just recent in the area, and people are moving there, and you know, Kingstown County booming as well. But it's just, you know, if you did have time and you want to go drive around there, it's a mixture of, you know, probably, I don't know. I don't know if there's local housing there. I know there's a few that they were going to design at one time, like park development on Winn-Dixie. So that's a place to look. This
Disney Celebration that developed years ago. That was kind of the idea of that whole thing. It started with a circle in the middle of the commercial, and then it went out around it as residential, but it was sold off years ago. But it's kind of neat in the concept, at least, kind of what you're saying here. You have commercial and residential intertwined, where all the trips are all together, and they had little piazzas, and you know, I mean, it was pretty neat. It was a neat little area to walk around in. You know, what it was like that.
The Olympic Village at Whistler in Canada exists and functions as a resort area. Of course, it was for Winter Olympics, and they use the mountain for mountain biking now. So you take the bikes up the mountain with gondolas.
Right.
And they have a lot more fun than we want.
Yeah.
And it's still inappropriate. They have a nice little grocery store, and they have open areas, and they have a place where they can do like a bandstand for the community kind of thing. And it's very wonderful to have hotels, which we're not talking about here, but they have something that connects the higher density residential and draws them through the whole. So
There's non-vehicular plazas.
One of the reasons people are so skeptical about the people like you coming here is because what we get on paper doesn't match what we get in the end product. This building is a prime example. We're supposed to have little buildings, lots of trees, and we got this, no trees and what. I never did cut anybody the others. Yep. And so a little bit gun shy, and sometimes we think the plans are a little sketchy, and people would rather, developers would rather take a fine for not following their plans than do as they say. So you're up against a little bit.
So that's why I don't hold it. I don't take any of this personally. Like I know.
Not you personally, just,
Yeah,
you know.
no, I mean, any developer who comes in, you should view them with suspicion. Like, I mean, again, I
I
live
mean, people will build
somewhere.
houses, do the same thing.
Yeah, no, I mean,
So,
developers have given themselves this reputation on their own, you know, so I get it.
yeah, so you'll get a little pushback about that too.
Absolutely fair.
Well, it's like the airport, too. I mean, not being specific to a town. I lived outside of Charlotte, and I lived in a neighborhood, and I thought the best thing about it was a new neighborhood. I didn't like Charlotte, but I liked my neighborhood because every single house was designed with a front porch, at least one front porch. Mine had an upper front porch. And it also had every house had a screened-in porch. And I think that's something we've lost. I mean, nobody, Susan, and us learned we live 4 houses from each other, but we both sit on our bachelor high. And so we didn't realize it. And I think we lost a lot of the, you know, you showed a lot of pictures about the old way. I think we've lost that. And I think if you're trying to build a community that's welcoming, what better way than to have somebody on their front porch saying, hey to you.
Amelia Park.
It's a meeting, and that's, I recommend it.
And we experienced that when we walked through it the other day after your recommendation. I mean, we were walking through the alleys and through the little trails and people were waving, dogs were doing their job, telling us to go away.
And a lot of people say, you know, like, why would you want to have, you know, a small house or on a smaller lot, and you know, just have a courtyard or whatever? And really in neighborhoods like that, and in historic neighborhoods, it's not about that private space. It is about the street is your place, and the neighborhood is really the thing, not just the house. Yeah, and parks. And so.
I think Seaside, Florida, I think is the community that Amelia Park was designed to kind of match, so.
Yeah, so the
Seaside
history,
on the Gulf.
the designer, the planner for Seaside, that firm did in the park.
Oh,
years
they
later.
did.
They
Right.
did, so that's where we see all the similarities to it.
And actually, they did a charrette for Amelia Park, just like this. Yeah, so the community was just as involved, just as questioning, just as concerned, because that was actually a pretty large. Yeah, it was, what, 30 years ago?
1998, I think.
Yeah, and so the same process was done, and so you can see what actually got built. And I would say from my conversations with folks who've been around for a long time, it was the plan that was submitted and approved by the city is what actually got built.
And just as a frame of reference, I've shared this with some people in other meetings, but the reason why they had the same process and used the charrette and all that, I used to work at that farm. And so I'm just like, when I started my firm, I was like, this really works. This is really great. And people love it and you get these great results. And so I modeled my firm after that firm. So,
And they went on to teach at the University of Miami,
Yes.
and they were my professors.
Claire's professors were.
And, yeah. Many people on the charrette here have also been on their charrettes as well.
Yeah. So you kind of get the Amelia Park gang back together again. So, you know, so hopefully we'll do this justice as you guys like that. So yes, ma'am.
I love the other part. I think it's absolutely gorgeous. And I love the feel of it, but I have no idea what the environmental impact is. Really part kind of development. It seems to me like an awful lot of artscape.
Yeah, well, and that's one of the things too, it's a great nuanced point to bring up, that while the principles, the overall guiding principles of walkable, front porch living, all of that stuff are universal, and you see them applied in towns and cities and hamlets and villages around the world, right? The specific application of those projects, of those principles, needs to be contextual to the site, right? And so the firm that designed Amelia Park and Seaside is called DPC. Is the name of the firm. DPC did a project outside of Birmingham called Mount Laurel. And in Mount Laurel, it was much more like it was at the foot of Double Oak Mountain, I think, and it's, you know, it was all wooded. And there, the concept was sort of a neighborhood built in concert with the land. And so I always talk about there, I so admired it because it's hard to do, really hard for the developers to do this, but they cleared the home sites with chainsaws and they graded the roads with bobcats. So there were no bulldozers and backhoes and all that. And then the trees that they cut down, they actually had a guy bring a lumber mill on site. They milled the trees that had to be removed for the homes to make street signs and benches and all of that stuff. And so it's kind of like, you know, that's a shame that we lost those trees, but let's do something with it for them. And so those are the kinds of things we're looking at for inspiration, and trying to do something that's appropriate here. So when we talk about Amelia Park as a good example, I'm not hearing you all say, yes, do that here. I think I'm hearing you say some of the things about that we like could be incorporated here in the
And there's
this property
also
its own way.
new research and understanding of environmental impacts since then that we can incorporate, that we now have the benefit of knowledge to do even better.
Yeah, so just to share a little bit, so I always try to do this in these meetings, just to get some feedback on as we're brainstorming and stuff, but in light of the discussions we've been having, we've been trying to think about what are the things that we can do to be, ultra sensitive on the land, right? And so we were talking about, using pervious paving, all those things, that's nothing new, excellence, you require that for some percentage of parking. And so it's okay, well, that's fine, that's the minimum standard, but what else? And then not only what will have a functionality with the stormwater in a sustainable way, but also might add character. And what is that unique, charming, different character? And so the last discussion we have had as a team kind of gathered around and we're sort of floating it to see if it would make Charles's head spin or not. I said, like, instead of in the back where you might have an alley normally, what if we had what I call a rear lane? And that rear lane was like, gravel or crushed shell or something. So you're driving through and like you hear your tires crunching that, and the water goes straight through, obviously, and has, it's way more pervious than pervious paving. And, I was like, okay, let's check into that. And then I said, well, actually, if we're going to go one step further, we worked on, I mentioned a few times, we worked on the comprehensive plan in Pinehurst, North Carolina, historic neighborhood. And there, one of the the features that they're known for is these clay sand pathways instead of sidewalks. And so it's kind of like compacted where it's nice to walk on, and you can actually, in some cases, hard enough where you can wheelchair or something like that. And we're like, okay, yeah, that could be cool. Let's look at that. So those are the kinds of things that we're talking about where, and I don't even know some places you may have examples of this kind of cool sort of moments. But I said, well, what about maintenance, Charles? Is that like something you'll be concerned about? And so we'll figure it out, So I hope we can do that kind of stuff. That's what those are the discussions we're having. The other thing we're thinking about is this character. A lot of it doesn't only come from the specific architectural style or design of the building. It has to do with the massing of the building, how big it is, how tall it is, how wide it is, And so, I have a general sense, and have talked to you, and also traveled around and looked at some of these wonderful areas we have, that the massing and the scale of things is more intimate. It's not about, so if you've gone to Bristol's webpage and you've seen the projects they do, they're like these big, kind of urban apartments, which would not be appropriate here, right? And so I think we say, okay, well, knowing that this is not what you normally do, Bristol, what can we do differently? And so one of the things we're trying to figure out is how to break down that scale and massing to more appropriate Amelia Island scale. And in order to do that, is there a way that we can actually consolidate some of the units into an area that is a little bit more dense, it's kind of tucked away where you don't have a sense for that. And then other areas are looked to either conserve, like really conserve, and if we are doing development, some of those to do it in a sort of small scale, fine grained, more intimate way. And so using kind of some of the tricks that they learned, like normally on a project of this size, you wouldn't even think about having to start parking, it just wouldn't make sense. You would pencil and all that. But we're actually looking at, can we do some construction work? Because every time we have to put parking, we're now having to cut down trees, right? So what can we do to consolidate as much as we can in a small area and do some really cool stuff elsewhere? Those are the kind of conversations we're having. So some of the things you'll see when we start showing stuff online. Yes, sir.
Yeah, one thing comes to mind is, down in St. Johns County, and I don't know if it would apply here because I've only been here about 30 years. But a lot of the masking they do is kind of grandiose water features for front entryways. I haven't heard anybody really talk about what pull in. It's got really nice landscaping and water features, like Beach Walk is at 14 for down what they built down there. It's, for what it is, it's pretty. I mean, you look at it and say, wow, it looks like a nice place, and it's landscape. So you do mask a lot of big buildings. And then the other thought was, I'm sure you've probably heard this, but Crane Island that's been developed, they really kept all the trees, the old trees, and they were very. And I can't speak. I lived near there, but I didn't wasn't there for the development of it, so I don't know, but it seems like they conserved the trees. They didn't, damage a lot of a lot of.
They've done a nice
foliage and
job
a
from
lot
our
of-
perspective.
They got nice pathways that go,
Yeah.
the river sea trail goes through part of it. So it was really nicely done too, so it's worth a drive through if some, we probably had it on the phone.
Yeah, we've been through there. We've actually talked to the developers and picked their brains about what techniques they used and what was successful and what wasn't. But you made a good point. The prices there are so high, it's pretty easy to do, be really sensitive and it's low. And so trying to figure out, what's a reasonable way, but a lot of the techniques they use, even though it is a really high-end neighborhood, are pretty similar, like the way they've done the little retaining around the tree wells and stuff, just like boards, it looks nice. So.
Yeah, and they were, the pathways are permeable, they're not solid.
Yes.
You can ride a bike on, but the water would probably flow through. And
Yeah.
it just ecologically, it seemed like it's done pretty well.
Yeah.
We've seen where they've used French drain over the top of, underneath parking lots. We've seen that where it's
Yeah.
stacked, they actually stack the French drain, so it's really a pond,
Yeah,
but it's a pond over a parking lot.
yeah.
And so you end up doubly using these areas, and then we've seen other areas where they've used ponds and then built parking and commercial over the top of the pond. So you're doubly using these things, so you're not taking out trees and putting a pond over here, and then parking's over here, and your commercial's over here. It's all
Exactly
stacked
the kind of
together.
stuff we're thinking, like,
So
what are
that's
those ways where we can be efficient? Because that's the thing about it, even like these developments that incorporate some of these techniques, the overall design of it is inefficient, and they often, there's not a consideration for place. So you get something that, like, on paper looks like it's functioning environmentally or from a sustainability standpoint better, but it's still like you haven't added something of character value to the community. And so we want to take all the boxes as we go. And so as you're doing, your research and your homework and looking up things and studying, and we're open to ideas. If you see something that's really cool, that what they're doing over in Portland, they do all these rain gardens. Share it with us. I have people literally all the time bringing us like. I know, you've got your water table.
Go to 90.
We've got a few examples of what you can do around you. We've been looking at, we've kind of lost.
Fountains are always nice. Like if you look at Albany, they got nice fountains in there. If you look at assisted living, nice fountains. It also aerates the water for wildlife. If you have stagnant water, you're gonna get algae and wildlife's gonna die.
Well, the airport said not
If
too
you
much
are gonna
wildlife.
build a pond, I would, highly recommend that, water features or aeration. Looks nice.
Articulated block. Articulated block, it's for maintenance areas. We've done that.
All right, so we're way over on time, which is totally fine with me, but I know y'all got stuff to do, and also draw some more. So thank you so much for your time. Any new ideas you think of, just drop back in. Studio's open until 7 o'clock at night. Opens at 9 again in the morning. There's no more meetings. This is the last meeting. But we'll be here working with it tomorrow, and then Monday night. You have to come back, please. We need your feedback on when we actually have something for you to look at. So it's like, what do you want? It's like, is this what you want? So,
What time is it, Monday?
6 o'clock. Yep.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Design and character discussion.
Yeah. Probably the most frustrating meetings.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one. Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah, they put them on there. Yeah. And did you go up and out?